Hey all, Siege here, and today I wanted to go over a bit of the history of the Infested within the Warframe universe, and I want to pose an interesting question regarding the potential extinction of this faction. Now, some of you will recognize almost immediately what I'm talking about, but before we get into that, a bit of history on the Infested I think is necessary. So first, what some might not know is that the current Earth we see in-game is a kind of project of the Orkin. The Earth had become uninhabitable for a time. The most likely reason we see the moon as the Orkin's seat of power, something that was apparently a necessity due to excessive pollution and a lack of natural resources. Not happy with the loss of the planet, and banking on the incredible technology of the Orkin, a biologist named Sylvana, who was renowned for her work in trying to understand the problems of Earth's new atmosphere, began to experiment with a type of nanite that, when applied to any substance, would begin to both consume and chemically restructure the organism for increased survivability and self-defense if necessary. The idea being that should the planet be saved by this technology, life on it would also be more hardy and durable to potentially stave off future threats to its existence. This was the initial purpose of technocyte, and in the case of plant life on Earth, most, if not all, the vegetation you see as you traverse the tileset is synthetic in nature. It's actually been speculated that this could potentially be the second time it's had to be repopulated too, as the in-game lore of the Infestation states that the Infestation describes both a disease and its victims, a metamorphic affliction without cure. Living organisms are consumed and merged into rabid amalgamations. Individuals are violent and animalistic, yet the larger whole exhibits signs of coordination, with multiple swarms converging on ships and colonies. Its origins are uncertain, but there is historical evidence of a similar outbreak before the collapse, suggesting that the Infested issue has been one they've had to deal with on at least more than one occasion. It's kind of a micro-view of the same thought many have with technology overall, and that while its potential is limitless, its potential for out-of-control or even nefarious purposes is just as limitless. And anything with that kind of world-changing potential requires the strictest of discipline in order to fully maximize without negative implications. Desire, greed, envy, without constant monitoring of the human side of this technology, the side directly manipulating it, well, as the Orkin found out, it could destroy everything. And it did. The real cost of which was that infested outbreaks outside the control of the Orkin were happening all over the system. The Technocyte program as a whole invariably shelved due to its failure. However, after a group of machines were sent into the void and came back self-aware, stripped of their ability to procreate and dead set on not allowing the Orkin to destroy the Tau system as they did the Earth, a reinvigorated need for something to fight back was required. So they began using the Technocyte once again, now modified for human use with the directive Helminth attached to it, to build what they thought would be super soldiers with the mind of an Orkin but the body of a god. Unfortunately, as we all know, they only got one part of that to occur consistently, as the Technocyte transformed the participants' bodies into impervious golems with superhuman traits. Their minds, however, generally did not carry over, and in the end, all the Orkin really did was create another enemy, or at the time, another failure they would have to contend with at some point were it not for the appearance of the Tenno, and their oddly convenient way of being able to do what the Orkin couldn't. It's always struck me weird that the mistake the Orkin made so nicely lined up with the effect the Void accident had on the Zariman 10-0, with the only survivors on the ship just so happening to possess the ability to control these super soldiers for the Orkin. Like, what luck, right? Now we see a couple different variants of the Infested and can surmise pretty easily who or what they used to be, with almost all of them resembling Grineer infantry units or Corpus crewmen. Although the ones I find most unique are the Ancients. Now these are said to be Orkin with the ability to heal, although I'm not sure if that's like Orkin medicine men, like doctors and such, or Orkin who actually had the innate ability to heal others. It kind of makes you wonder what other Orkin of the time could do, and could this be how the Warframe's abilities are derived? Like, say Trinity was originally an Orkin woman who had the innate gift to heal, and when Helminth was introduced to her system, it not only mutated her form and durability, but also her innate abilities to the broken levels she's often been able to achieve over the years. Perhaps Ballas identified these specific traits in potential subjects, and used the Technocyte to not only enhance their bodies, but also exponentially increase any innate abilities they might have had. After all, he does mention that he took their greatest, volunteers or not. Maybe that's how all the Warframe's abilities come into being. All of them just incredibly amplified versions of what the original person was able to do as a human being. If that were the case, it would be like a mini Marvel movie, or maybe a more apt description would be like a good X-Men movie in old Oregon town. Makes me wish there was more information on how the Orcan lived versus how most of the lore just explains how they died. Because having a bit of insight into the day-to-day from an Orcan's perspective would probably flesh out more as to how and why the citizens and soldiers were chosen. I feel like this could also shed more light on exactly how the nanites for the Technosite were derived, and who knows, maybe we could even see a Warframe being made. That, however, brings up another interesting point about the Infested and their connection to the Warframes. The introduction of the Infested nanites into the bodies of the citizens may have blossomed their skin into sword steel and interlinked their organs with untold resilience, but it also did something else. It made them susceptible to something else, and that something else is whatever we find to finally end the Infested once and for all. See, the Infested acts like your typical over-the-top infectious zombie disease, looking for new hosts to infect and then overtaking their mind and their body in its entirety. I think the dialogue we received during the Lophantis fight speaks directly to the idea that there is a larger hive mind that thinks, if you will, for the whole of the Infested, or if nothing else, for large sections of it. Lophantis speaks to us as if we were brothers or sisters, and in fact, we're just that. Regardless if there is one mind or many, though, the real issue that Tenno faces is that they can never truly destroy the Infested. Ever. Why, you may ask? Well, in almost every situation I can compare the Infested to, the Flood in Halo, the Necromorphs in Dead Space, the T or G virus in Resident Evil, the only way there ever seems to be to win, per se, is to eradicate everything, down to the last molecule. And that usually comes in the form of something that specifically keys on the biological properties of that particular organism and breaks it down from the inside. After all, we've killed thousands of all these creatures and they keep coming back, so conventional weapons and even something as powerful as a Warframe can do nothing more than just keep the numbers down. So, here's the question of the video, and as I mentioned before, some of you are already realizing the rather large downside to successfully developing some type of weapon, virus, nanite, or whatever to completely eradicate the Infestation. Killing them will most certainly take all the Warframes with it. I can't envision a method of individually administering a vaccine or whatever this thing turns out to be to each Infested in the system, and as we know, if one still exists, they all still exist. So, this would have to be a planet-wide or even a system-wide purge of the Infested, and given that the Warframes are infested flesh themselves, this puts them in the same danger as our enemy. So there it is, Tenno. If you had the chance to completely eradicate the Infested, knowing that you would have to sacrifice your Warframes in the process, would you? Here's another question I'm going to tack on to that as well. I want you to ask yourself, what exactly has the system done for you? After all, the Infested aren't really a problem for the Tenno, just for everybody else. So, are you saving the system? Regardless what happens with the Sentience, the Corpus, or the Grineer, the Infested will always be a plague, and furthermore, as time passes, it's essentially possible they will take over every world they have encountered. I mean, that's pretty much how the Technosite works. It's not programmed to think about the morality of anything it does. It's just pure desire to consume and transform. So regardless when the question is asked, it will eventually need to be put on the table. And let me rephrase it a little bit for you. If the only faction remaining was the Infested, the most likely faction to survive everything, and you were offered the chance to eradicate it all, Infested enemies, Warframes, and even some of your companions, not to mention old Helminth and the Orbiter, in order to achieve system-wide peace, would you do it? I'm really curious to hear your answers. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video today, and maybe it got you thinking a little as to what the final endgame of Warframe would most likely entail. For now, the choice is yours on how you would shape the world. What will you do? At any rate, I hope you have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.